All right, the New York Jets are on the clock, number 3 overall. Now, let's go back to last year a little bit because they had that trade. You guys did a good job of quantifying the trade. We've added a little bit more context to that. They traded from 6 up to 3 to go get Sam Darnold. How did that essentially shake out when you guys evaluate the trade?
Yeah, I mean, it cost them 4 second-round picks and the first-round pick. We found, the trade initially, if you don't take into consideration quarterbacks and the value that they are, it's a very good trade for the Colts. And I think that still is true. That value, that number 3 overall pick doesn't have the same utility for the Colts with a franchise quarterback as it does with the Jets. If you look at it from the perspective of the Jets, a quarterback offers enough value for that trade to be at least close to being fair on the side of the Jets. So, in hindsight, obviously the pick the Jets gave up in the second round this year is higher than what we would have expected going in. So, I mean, it's not necessarily, trading up isn't necessarily something you want to do all the time, but for a prospect like Darnold, who showed out pretty well at the end of the season, wasn't the worst thing in the world.
So it's truly a win-win. I mean, the Colts don't care about the quarterback. They're winning the trade in their mind.
The roles are now reversed, right? So last year, the Jets are looking at it from the perspective of we don't have a quarterback, so this third pick is a quarterback in our minds. And as we know, the value and volatility at the quarterback position is way higher, right? So as Eric said, from their perspective last year, it makes sense for them to make that jump. Now this year, they're really in the same spot as the Colts were, right? Holding that third pick, looking at this third pick from a quarterback agnostic position, right? We're not going to take a quarterback here. And so now for them, it makes sense to try and recoup some of those assets. You look at this team, there's a void of talent pretty much everywhere. I think they've got some strong players right in the secondary. But
I mean, you didn't even remember their tight end's name, and neither did I.
Look, it's basically still the same guy it's been for the past 10 years.
No, but that's perfect. I think it sets up perfectly for the Jets because, like we're saying, it's risky to trade up. But now they're in this perfect position where they have the number 3 pick, and they should be trading down as much as possible to build that roster.
You're playing with house's money to a certain degree now that we know Darnold last 4 weeks of the season was the highest graded quarterback in our system. So you're playing with house's money, knowing that some of that uncertainty associated with drafting a QB has gone away a little bit. The only difference between where the Colts were sitting last year and where the Jets sit now is that you know that when you move up to 3, you're getting at least one of the 2 or 3 quarterbacks that you like. This season, it's not necessarily clear that you're going to get one of the 2 quarterbacks who are even in the ballpark for the top 2 picks, which is Haskins and Murray. They could trade up, they could trade this pick to somebody and those 2 quarterbacks be gone. And then the reason you're trading up is sort of, as George was saying, moot, because that pick doesn't necessarily have as much utility to that team.
Well, let's do this real quick because we've talked about the Niners a little bit. We've talked about the Cardinals. Let's pretend the QBs go off the board 1 and 2 to whomever trades up, right?
Yeah.
Now the Jets are sitting there with the 2 closest sure things on the defensive side of the ball as far as just projecting at the next level. You've got Nick Bosa and Quinnen Williams, the guys that everybody expects to be the top players. Some team is going to covet those guys. So now if you're the Jets, we've discussed the value of trading down. Do you take a Bosa? Do you take a Quinnen Williams? Or do you trade that to the team that's trying to go get the blue chip defensive player?
I mean, this is where it's going to be tough because the Jets have a clear needed edge. They haven't gotten any pressure there
for like 10 years.
For like 10 years, they tried like Sheldon Richardson out there at one point, Muhammad Wilkerson, and now they basically,
stunningly that didn't work.
They basically have no one there. A lot of the edge, the edges that are elite are being gobbled up via the franchise tag and free agency, so they may not get one of those elite players there. So you could make an argument that this, if you add need plus the relative value of an edge versus corner, that there might be something to be had there. At the same time, Tremaine Johnson was kind of a bust last year. Buster Screen's contract is over with. He didn't play well to begin with. Morris Claiborne was a free agent.
They have a massive need at corner.
They have a massive need at corner. So if all else being equal, that's where they should look, and hence trading down would probably be the best move, even if you're giving up what's going to be a pretty good player at a position of need for them.
Yeah, to me, the Niners and the Jets are in very similar situations. but the Jets have a worse roster. And so I think it makes actually even more sense for the Jets to trade down. And if you can't find a buyer, again, you're trying to maximize your chance to win the Super Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any prayer at it, it's going to be because Sam Darnold is more like the guy we saw the last 4 weeks than he was for the early part of the season, or at least you certainly hope so. And if you are going to compete in that division, right, or you're going to get out of that conference, you're going to have to be able to cover somebody, because we all know what the good quarterbacks, Tom Brady being one of them, will do if you can't cover someone. They're going to pick you apart. So,
well, check out we had a little debate: edge, interior defensive line, pass rusher essentially versus corner. We have a whole breakdown on that and why it applies to the Jets in this situation, right? So, much like the Niners, as you said, best case scenario is trade down, and it matches up perfectly with them having to do the opposite last year.
And there are enough teams that, the Raiders being one of them, who can't generate pressure to save their lives, who are probably going to value a Quinnen Williams and a Nick Bosa pretty highly. And they should, because there's going to be a point in this draft where those guys are tremendous value, and maybe you can squeak out a couple of those extra picks that the Raiders have accumulated in return for that, and then you end up with a corner and a guy that maybe is a second-tier pass rusher, but because, as we explained earlier, right, the certainty is a little bit better for those players, those edge and interior players, still a guy that's playable.
Yeah, I mean, that, for example, Oakland has the change to move up, one spot or a couple spots.
Right.
And then we've seen, like, in the last few drafts, the depth in terms of interior players, edge players, in terms of value, in terms of athleticism, in terms of guys who graded well in the PFF system, is there to where if Oakland gave you pick 27, for example, to move up, there's still going to be a good player there that can help your defense, or a good offensive lineman that can help.
I don't think they're getting 27 for a one-spot move, but you're going to, even if you grab an extra third rounder, whatever what the Bears and Niners did a couple years ago just to move up one spot. I mean, it's still worth it, because you're still getting.
And here's the thing that I think comes into play for the Jets is the idea that there are players that move up through the combine, DK Metcalf, Montez Sweat, who are going to allow you to trade down and still recoup value that you might have gotten at your original pick.
Because they're going to be wasted on other picks.
So you might have a team out there that's like, look, the missing piece, it's DK Metcalf, right? We just need to run sprints up and down the sideline, and he's going to be able to do that for us. We need to trade the house, right? The Saints did this last year, right? They gave up another #1 pick to move up a couple spots, and the Chargers and the Packers, who both ended up moving down, got guys that probably would have taken it their earlier positions.
Jair Alexander, Derwin James. They're making out winning the draft. Yep.
Yeah, so I think for the Jets, this is your time. You have a quarterback on a rookie contract, so try and get as many pieces to the puzzle as you can, and look to trade down. And if you can't, not all is lost by taking one of those top corners.
Yeah, what's great about this offseason is free agency hasn't even started. The Jets have over $100 million in cap room,
right.
So all of these things are going to evolve throughout the month of March and April. So it'll be really interesting to see, if we want to talk about them in a month from now, what are their true needs, because a lot of them are probably going to be gobbled up through spending in free agency.
And that speaks to the reason why you go corner instead of edge here, just really quickly, right? It's you feel much more comfortable at predicting a edge or interior player in his second contract than you do a corner. So if you're saying, okay, which one of these guys am I going to pay on a rookie scale, and which one of these guys am I going to go out and pay in free agency, you have to take the option of going, look, I'm going to take the corner in the draft. Hopefully it works out, in which case I've got a very valuable asset at a cheap price. But if I'm going to spend a ton of money, then it's going to be on a guy I feel more confident about, and that's at the edge or interior position.
And ultimately, if you have one of the first 4 picks in the draft, there's 2 coveted quarterbacks, probably 2 coveted defensive players. You're in a good spot,
right,
where you could be in trade down
territory. A whole lot of
so definitely the best strategy for the Jets to build that roster, trading down.
Right, assuming Kyler Murray's gone.
Assuming.
We won't get into that now.
Kyler Murray versus Sam Darnold, a whole separate video weighing their value. What would you do?
You can go check out a former PFF forecast where I gave my 2 cents, and some Jets fans were angry.
Which is the first team that doesn't draft Kyler Murray if he's available in the draft? You'd have to know the whole draft order off the top of your head, but do that another time.
For another video.
Another video, right after your running back rankings.